Okay, hi everybody, and welcome to our Intersex Awareness Commemoration Day here at Iranti. Firstly, thank you so much to all of our guests who are here with us in person. We really appreciate your presence. We know it's sort of after hours, but we're really glad to have you with us in this space. To everyone who's joining us online, thank you so much for being with us as well. We hope that you will participate in the conversation. I think it's going to be a really robust and exciting sort of conversation that we're going to have. So thanks to all of you, to all of our panelists who are here today. Thank you so much for joining us. And then, of course, to Crystal, the main person here today. Today's your day, Crystal. Really proud of you for pulling this together. So I wish you everything of the best. I hope all of you are going to enjoy this. I'm going to hand over to my colleague, my co-director, Nowazi.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nurwazi, and I'm the co-director of Iranti. I can't say much more than what Jade has said, except to also thank the Iranti team, who always, comes together for these kinds of events and helps us put it together. We also want to give a thank you to Green Star Media, who are our media partner and have given us this wonderful setup with all the cameras and the entire production. So if you do want to have a production that is as beautiful, please do contact Green Star Media. We don't want to take up too much more of your time beyond saying Namgelegile, which is to say you are welcome here at House of Iranti. This is queer land. This is our land. So please feel at home.
Firstly, again, I just want to thank everybody that's here in person, everybody that's live on YouTube and those on Zoom, and especially for the amazing panelists that agreed to having this conversation today. So today we commemorate Intersex Awareness Day, and this morning people started texting me Happy Intersex Awareness Day, and it comes with a little discomfort because yes, we want to celebrate this day and we want to celebrate intersex people, but as an intersex person that's gone through horrible treatment from the medical fraternity and has felt like a science experiment their whole life, I just don't see the happy when it comes to intersex awareness. But that's why it's important that we are in this room to change the narrative around intersex healthcare and to change the conversation that people have when it comes to intersex people. We have a lot of different people in the room, and I think I will just briefly start by saying what is intersex, because maybe not everybody knows. So what is intersex? Very shortly, so intersex people are born with natural variations in their sexual characteristics. I just want to say the word again, natural variations in their sex characteristics. And this could be linked to hormones, it could be linked to genetics, it could be linked to internal and external genitalia. So it could be linked to many other different things within sexual characteristics. Experts estimate that about 2% of the population is intersex, which means there are millions of intersex people. But an intersex activist like me that knows that intersex records are hidden, it's kept a secret and no one knows about it. I know that studies does not have the correct quantitative numbers of intersex people that exist in the world. And therefore, it's also important for us, especially as an African nation, to ensure that we conduct our own studies and our own research around intersex people within our communities. For the longest time, intersex people have faced many different human rights violations, and this happens globally. Especially the one that gets talked about the most is intersex genital mutilation, because we live in a society that's obsessed with binaries and with sex. Or almost all of the time, intersex infants are put through unnecessary and unconsensual cosmetic surgeries to make sure that they are aligned within the boxes of sex. So that means doctors feel that they should decide a sex for an intersex child. They should decide if this child is female or male. What this does is strips away the self-determination and the bodily autonomy of intersex people because they do not have a choice over their body. And also they end up having lifelong medical complications, which could be linked to their physical health and their mental health. And that's why we are having this conversation today to talk about what we can do as a society with healthcare to make intersex a safe space for intersex people, healthcare, sorry, a safe space for intersex people. So I have my panelists with me. Some are online, and I have Professor Anthony Brown in person. And I'm just going to hand over to them to do a short introduction. And we'll start with Casey Blake.
Hi, I am Casey Blake. I'm a registered counsellor with a special interest in sexuality, gender, relationship, and erotic diversity. I work in Edenvale and online.
I'll move to Professor Ian Ross.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me tonight. I'm an adult endocrinologist and working at the University of Cape Town. It's a real privilege and honor to be participating tonight.
Thank you, Professor Ian. Professor Anthony.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anthony Brown. I'm a professor at the University of Johannesburg in the Faculty of Education, and I'm responsible for teacher education, inclusive education, where I'm mainly responsible for the inclusion of SOGIA's identities.
Thank you so much. Dr. Edna, can you hear us? Can you go ahead to introduce yourself?
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Good evening. I'm Dr. Edna Majaliwa, a pediatric endocrinologist from Mwimbi National Hospital, that is the main referral hospital in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. I'm glad to be with you here, and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much. So what we are going to do, we're going to start with the questions to our panelists. We really want this to be an interactive session. So we have Putu that has a roaming mic. So whenever someone has a question within the audience, please raise your hand. And also those that are on Zoom, if you can please raise your hand when you have a question, and we will attend to you. I'm going to start with Casey Blake. Casey, I feel like I've known you for the longest time. I started activism in 2017, and you were one of the first persons that I met at that meeting. And, I felt so affirmed to think that there are counselors that are really there that want to support intersex people and, support the work that we do, but also to ensure that it's really safe and intersex people can, feel comfortable. So I want to ask you, what changes do you believe we need to have in the health system to ensure protection for intersex people?
This is really hard for me to narrow down because I have many feelings, as those of you who know me know, but I've managed to pull down to some thoughts. I think that the biggest thing is, in terms of health, we need a lot more education for public and medical professionals in general about the fact that intersex variations exist. They're natural variations. They are not medical emergencies, or at least most of them aren't. I'm saying that because I feel like someone's going to say, what about? And just in case. I think that having public health and public education around intersex issues helps reduce the shame associated with feeling like you need to keep your difference a secret, which a lot of people who have intersex variations experience because of societal taboos, prejudice, a variety of different feelings, especially the ones around difference. I think that within the medical fraternity, we need to have much more access to counseling for parents and families who have just received a diagnosis for their infants, if that's when the diagnosis is happening, or for their teens or tweens who are going through puberty, if that's where the diagnosis is happening. I think that because nobody knows that intersex variations are natural and exist, despite the fact that some stats say there's the same amount of people who are twins, or there's more intersex people than there are twins in the world, but that is closely linked in terms of numbers. I think this leads to a whole lot of feelings around, what went wrong if we don't know this is normal, if we don't know this is natural. I think a lot of families try and figure out how to hide this, and they don't know what to do. There's pressure to assign a gender marker. At least we can change those on the South African birth register. So, in terms of what can we do, we need to provide more space to think. we need to provide more space to think and feel, and what does this mean for us as a family? How do we navigate this? How do we create a space where our child doesn't feel like they have to be a secret, or keep parts of themselves a secret? Because I think that's extremely damaging overall for mental health. Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much, Casey, for mentioning that key points. No two intersex stories are the same, and I always share my own personal story because that is the only story that I can talk about. And I'm just thinking about exactly what you said of keeping it a secret. I was never told I was intersex, right? But during my stages of visiting doctors, everything was very secretive, right? Doctors used language that myself could not understand and my mother could not understand, as a 15-year-old. But one thing about me internally, I always felt that something is wrong with me. I thought I was either dying or something was horribly wrong because I have to go for all these tests. But as a 15-year-old, I'm not sure why they are doing the test. And I always recall, and I tell people why healthcare is not a safe space for intersex people, and why as an intersex adult now, it's very difficult for me to seek help from a health professional. Because when my surgery was conducted, and people know because of my story, when the doctor asked me to put my robe over my face and took pictures of a 15-year-old girl's naked body, I didn't know why he took pictures of my body. And now that I'm 35, I know that this was research, right? This was research. And this doctor was writing a paper and he found this intersex person and he thought, oh, this is so interesting. And, but never told me about what was happening. And still to this day, I don't have access to my medical records because for me, I was like, I want to see those pictures, and wherever it is in a research book, I wanted to remove because I need to get back my autonomy. And for many intersex people, they will tell the same story about having 15 doctors around your bed discussing you in terms that you do not understand. And this actually pushes intersex people away from healthcare and the actual healthcare that they need because it's not safe. And I thank you for mentioning those things. I'm moving on to Dr. Edna. Dr. Edna, if you can hear me. Dr. Edna, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Tanzania. I really appreciate you being here and for the work that you are doing for the intersex community. I would like to ask you if you could tell us more about the challenges you face within health when treating intersex patients.
Thank you, Crystal. Thank you, Cassie, for what you've said already, because those are the challenges we go through. But as you know, intersex has been evolving, and we're going, at least it is much better than it used to be. But then I'll start backward, or say somewhere in between. The cultural and social context affecting us, especially Africa. So it's like intersex is something to hide. People are not yet coming out. And so as a result, we have very late diagnosis. And even the healthcare providers, it is difficult, like in African context, in our cultural beliefs, when someone is born, it's either a boy or a girl. So someone will ask, so-and-so has delivered. Yes. Is it a boy or girl? So it is difficult for a healthcare provider to say, I'm not sure what this is. I'm not sure if it's a girl or a boy. Just in between. So somehow they give any sex, so they might say it is a girl or it's a boy. And as they grow, they keep changing. And so the diagnosis becomes late. So many healthcare providers are not yet sure what it is. I think the educational part is lacking as well. So their information's missing. And some of them, it's not really hard to treat. They're complicated ones, but then there are times they can remain as they are. So despite the delays and late presentations, we also have challenges in diagnostic facilities. And if you're doing diagnosis, it is very expensive. The hormones are very expensive. Karyotyping is very expensive. Sometimes they're not accessible. And so sometimes you just have to go, and a parent or the relative might not manage to do those tests. Then you let the patient go, and and the expertise, of course, is difficult. There are few people, like if I say in Tanzania, we are around 60 or so million people, and we are about 8 pediatric endocrinologists. There are about 15 or so adult endocrinologists. And so there are very few people dealing with intersex, and you find sometimes they just do surgery. Somewhere they're diagnosed intersex and they do surgery immediately, and it's difficult when you've done surgery and as they grow, looks like they've changed from the sex you had assigned, and you can't turn it back. So what should I say? You've reduced the self-confidence of that person, the self-image of that person. And so it's difficult really on treatment, because it is not widely known, I would say, and the education is still minimal.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Edna. And it's really important when we speak about the syllabus as well, when we come to healthcare. In 2018, we had a national engagement where we spoke to some health professionals, and we had one doctor that says, like, this is probably something that we cover in a lecture for 2 hours, and then we move on, and then it's something that we never speak about. And because of the binaries of sex, people believe that they have to choose the sex for a child. And it's exactly like Dr. Edna said, that that child will have different challenges growing up as an adult. And also speaking about is that doctors perform intersex genital mutilation on intersex children, infants, without consent, or to intersex adults without giving them proper information. But then the challenge in the healthcare system is that later on, there's no accessible healthcare for intersex adults, right? People get placed on hormone replacement therapy, and then later they cannot afford the therapy once they become an adult, and they don't qualify for government or state services. And this is all the struggles or the challenges that people face. And also to bring it back to the cultural norms. In South Africa, there was a study done in Northwest, and what we don't speak about as well is the infanticide when it comes to traditional healing, is where midwives actually confess that if a child is born with ambiguous genitalia and they can't see if it's a boy or a girl, they would actually snap the neck of the child and tell the parents that it's a stillbirth. So not only are we facing intersex genital mutilation in our state and private practices, but we are also facing the infanticide in our religious and traditional practices as well. So thank you so much, Dr. Edna. I'm gonna move on to Professor Ian Ross. Professor Ian, most health professionals dealing with intersex people has the notion that they need to fix the intersex child. What is wrong with the approach, and what recommendations do you have on how we should be approaching intersex healthcare? Thank you.
First of all, thank you very much. I must say, I'm quite shocked about what I've heard tonight. As a healthcare provider, I'm quite shocked. There are a number of things that have shocked me, but that aside, I want to address, first of all, that I am a government employee and I see state patients. I don't see private patients, and that's the context from what I am referring to at this stage. The other comment I want to make specifically directed to you is that I'm really, really sorry that you've had a awful personal experience. I must say that is awful. And I also would like to address, hopefully, consent has come a little way further than what it has in the past. So I'm once again shocked about your experience of being examined by a whole range of doctors. Hopefully we've advanced on that, and to write a case report needs a fair amount of consent and information before that can be done. But to address your specific queries, what we need is a caring, supportive counseling approach, particularly from treating physicians. Patients encounter many difficulties in respect of their own gender identity, knowing that there's something fundamentally wrong with a very key aspect of their existence. And you can reflect on a number of things that you've encountered in the news, but patients and may find difficulty participating in various sports, especially if they participate in their preferred gender stream. Individuals often encounter difficulty with their own sexuality. A multidisciplinary team comprising medical, surgical, urological, and psychological experts ensures the most favorable outcome, and the needs vary according to the phase of the patient's medical trajectory. Now, at each phase of the individual's development, unfortunately, challenges exist, especially with the introduction of hormone therapy, induction of puberty, and maintenance of hormone therapy. At each phase, a compassionate approach is warranted. Several of our patients have had a gratifying outcome. They're well balanced, they have a good quality of life, but this is not universally the case. Overall, as a group of conditions, unfortunately, it is a challenge for both the physician and the patients, but physicians have to be receptive to their patients' needs, as medical therapy, as you can well imagine, is never perfect and warrants careful adjustment. And in several of these conditions, lifelong endocrine care is warranted, and this emphasizes the long-term importance of an optimal professional relationship. So those are really a few of my points that I wanted to add, and hopefully they're helpful to you.
Thank you so much, Professor Ian. And one word really stood out for me is compassionate, right? Compassionate care, and how professionals need to understand that they are dealing with people, and this is not a science experiment. This is not a treasure you found in a Lucky Charm box. This is an actual human that you are dealing with. This is not about you discovering something and then you're going to write this amazing research paper and forget about the human in front of you. And, you know, as activists, when we speak, we always say that intersex rights are human rights. And that's something that people often forget. They forget about the human and they think about the medicine. And for the longest time, we have really been trying to depathologize issues when it comes to intersex people, right? Like within South Africa, we don't actually have laws to protect intersex people. We have POPUDA, which speaks about torture, speaks about discrimination, but there's nothing in there that protects intersex people from harm. We have Act 49, the Sex Descriptors Act, which allows intersex people to change their gender marker. However, it's so pathologizing that intersex people still need to prove who they say they are. A doctor needs to decide your gender. A psychologist needs to say, yes, you are the gender that you say you are. And as intersex people, we are just asking for self-determination because we never asked for these unconsensual and unnecessary surgeries. They were forced upon us because the medical fraternity feels that they should choose sex for people and gender. But now when intersex people wants to affirm themselves, they don't have any options available. Therefore, we actually need compassion when dealing with intersex people, even dealing with them in their daily lives. I work with intersex people and we don't think like other people. We don't process things like other people because from the moment we were born, we had no rights, you know, we had no choice, we had no say. And especially that's how intersex people navigate life. And that's something not only as healthcare, but as a society, when dealing with intersex people, you need to think of those things. How can I approach this compassionately, you know, how can I approach this human with kindness because of the experiences they've had. Thank you so much, Dr. Ian Ross. Professor, Professor Anthony Brown, thank you so much for joining me today in person. So I know you've done some amazing research on intersex people and intersex rights, especially in Africa and South Africa. So I want to ask you, when doing this research and you think of the topic today, healthcare being a safe space for intersex people, what came about your conversations that you had with intersex people when doing your research?
What motivated me for this conversation, Crystal, was the field that I'm in. I'm a teacher educator. Now, young people's lives starts in the hospital as an infant, but it continues in society. And the first open society space is school. And school, just like the mainstream society, is a compulsory heteronormative, cis-normative school. If you've got a distinctive penis, you are male. There's curriculum for you, there's facilities for you, and so it is for the opposite sex. If you have a vagina, you're female. And school uphold this in a very systemic way.
Yeah.
And my research interest and scholarship in teacher education has to do with inclusive education, and particularly with young people with SOGIESC identities. And so I started to do research in the LGBTIQ plus community. But when we use this acronym, we focus on lesbians, gays, and it's starting now with transgender identities. But we so casually use this acronym LGBTI, and we never think and consider, what does this I stand for? Is this I in the curriculum? Who is this I? Do we have the I learner in the school? And there was a complete silence as I wanted to learn about this. And I realized that the silence is not only in mainstream society, the silence is also amongst us as the LGBTIQ community.
Yeah.
Right. There's a complete silence there. So I was interested in that. And I want to acknowledge Dimakatso and Garfield. And Garfield was the first person I met, and she shared her story. I'm like, oh my word. What an injustice of knowledge that's not in our education system. Because I believe inclusive education prepares for an inclusive society. And if we do not have this knowledge in schools, we will not have it in society. And so Garfield introduced me to more people. And I started to hear their stories. And because school is so heteronormative and cisnormative, the first thing that these people said to me, because I wanted to know, what was your school experience? They said, I felt I didn't even know who I am. I didn't even know what to call it. I started to search on the internet when it came out, a person with this and a person with that. I didn't have a name. That is how silent and invisible the I is across society and the body of knowledge.
Yeah.
And then, because of this compulsory heteronormativity, these bodies of natural variant sex developments were deemed as shameful and abnormal. Therefore, we have the mutilation. Therefore, we have the fixing. We need to reduce or we need to remove the shame. And that's, so many of them and their parents who did not go for the surgery had to hide this reality. And because it was hidden, they had a lifelong experience of shame, a lifelong experience of trauma. It did not stop with the doctors there.
Yeah.
It comes through all the way at school, because when it's adolescence, there's this lesson on the development of the body. Girls develop breasts, they will have pubic hair, that's the vagina, that's the penis. And they looked at this lesson and they said, I don't look like that.
Not at all.
I am abnormal. And so through cycles of society, this abnormal narrative is reinforced, the trauma is reinforced, the anxiety of coming out is reinforced. And this was quite a very traumatic experience. Now, somebody mentioned it there, that even in our society, we have certain perceptions and constructions of non-normativities. And three of my participants lived in fear because one of the parents, the brother said to him, listen, this thing is a curse. You have done something, or someone in the family has done something, so the ancestors have cursed you. Take this child to Durban. You'll make good money. What does that mean? This child must be killed and the body parts must be sold to traditional healers, because there's a belief that their body part that is deemed non-normative holds certain powers. The other one in the Northwest was sort of hijacked, and this person was supposed to be killed. The person freed themselves, and then one day got hold of one of the people who wanted to kidnap them and asked what happened. The person said, your uncle said, we must kill you and bring your body parts to him because it was supposed to be sold to a traditional healer. It does not start and end with the hospital. It goes through cycles of trauma and danger in society. And because of this construction of non-normativity and abnormality, there is an internal hate of the body, of the self. And many of my participants expressed experiences of suicidality. So beyond the trauma on the physical body is the severe psychological impact on these individuals. And I want to end with this, Crystal, to say that this is a result of the silence and invisibility of knowledge and understanding of natural variant intersex developments.
Wow, thank you so much, Professor. And it's just like you said, and I laughed a bit when you said the person had to Google themselves. And that's the case for many intersex people, right? Because doctors do not give you a diagnosis, and you feel something is wrong with you, and now you are hiding your entire life. And me coming into finding out that I was intersex was me going on Google that my body doesn't have this, it doesn't have this, and me trying to like figure out, so who is this? And I mean, this is me as a 22-year-old living for 6 years already, not knowing, why did I have the surgery? Why did this have to be done? Doctors never told me. My mother barely speaks English. She didn't understand them. And therefore, for 6 years, I lived this life, not knowing who I am and hiding it and feeling so ashamed of that I'm different. I remember going on vacations with my cousins, and I'm like, I don't want to bath with them. I don't want to, because people are going to look at each other's bodies and they're going to be, Crystal, why is your breast growth so minimal? Like, all these things, because I didn't know as well what was happening to my body until I went on Dr. Google and found people in the intersex community. And then when I had money, was able to get a proper testing done. And that's also, so the problem is that certain tests gets done within state and private hospitals, like chromosome testing, genetic testing, but these tests are not available because intersex people do not have access to their health records. So they live these lives not knowing, and because of this, they face the mental problems. So I want to ask Casey Blake, in your experience as a counselor, what recommendations would you have to health practitioners working on mental health and mental well-being, on how they should approach mental wellness when it comes to intersex people?
Oh, Crystal, I think I want to start with talking to the patient as a person, talking to the family about this little human that they've got. If it's an infant diagnosis, if it's not an infant diagnosis, talk to the person. I mean, this whole thing about not having access to your own records, but not having understanding about what's going on with your own body, what's going on with, why these things happening. So that's the one thing. I think we need to, as medical professionals, we need to talk to the patient. We need to talk to our clients as if they're people, because, they are. The next thing that comes to mind is how important it is to make contact with other intersex people and intersex organizations. I've had a couple parents contact me over the years because their child at whatever age was diagnosed with an intersex variation and they struggle to find support. So I don't know if there are parent support spaces or community spaces for parents and families of intersex people and intersex people themselves to go and find each other outside of a trauma bond. Because I think when you find other intersex people, especially if they're already adults, the general story is one of trauma, one of like everything that's been mentioned by Prof. Anthony, by yourself, by Edna. And what was lacking is what Ian spoke about, which is, compassion. So how do we find spaces where people just are living their lives? So I think a recommendation is for hospitals to start asking for consent to share contact details if family members want to be contacted by other family members who also have these intersex variations. I think people need to know that they're not the only ones. It's like, you're the only one, you're special. It doesn't feel special. It doesn't feel great. And knowing that you're not the only one does wonders for self-worth. So yeah, I'll stop there for now.
I just wanted to add one thing that is so critical. It starts with the construction of the identity. Within the medical fraternity, it is an outdated term, but it is still a very used term. The moment a child is born with a natural variant sex characteristic, they call it DSD, disorder of sexual development. Now, if you start with that word, disorder, from the first day of your life, you are an other, you are an outcast. And the trauma starts right there. So the language will have to change. Can we have more affirming reference? Can we really undo and remove the DST reference of disorder so that we can humanize and bring personhood into that, into the life of people with variant intersex developments? I think it starts there. The second part, you said, my mom couldn't speak proper English. I'm wondering, what's the Afrikaans word for intersex? That would be a common word. What is that word in isiZulu, Setswana, isiXhosa? That would be affirming. All the words we have are derogatory. And maybe it starts with the language when we refer to these bodies to change it into an affirmative personhood.
Definitely, and language is a very important thing because everything has been so westernized, and everything that we know is from the Western world. And obviously, when they call it a disorder of sexual development, you already think that I'm dying, I'm sick, something is going to happen to me. And then doctors come with the threat of cancer, and they tell parents, they told my mother that I was going to have cancer if I didn't have my testes removed, and therefore I need to remove it. And yet they removed healthy hormone producing parts out of my body by telling me that if we don't remove these, you're going to be cancer. you're going to have cancer, but then placing me on alternative hormone replacement therapy that's actually has studies linked to cancer. So it's like, so what are you saying? Because you are the healthcare professional. I'm supposed to trust you and I'm supposed to have faith in you, but you are telling me that, yes, your body is producing hormones, but let's remove those parts because in 30 years you might have cancer, but let's actually put you on medication that could possibly cause you to have cancer. So it's very difficult when it comes to pathologization. And, you know, in the US, they've changed the term, I think the World Health Organization, and they are calling it, it's still DSD, but they're calling it differences in sexual development. And it's like Casey said, you know, when they tell an intersex child, oh, you are special, you are one of a kind, it's only you. And the word differences it's still in healthcare telling the child that you are different. You are not like every other child in the street. You are not like any other child in your school. You are different. And in that calling you different makes you feel that you should not be celebrated as a child, you know, and it immediately impacts you for your entire life. So when it comes to language, especially in the health system, we really have to think of how we can approach this to make sure that it's understandable. If I think of my intersex diagnosis that I don't like to use, it's called complete androgen insensitivity syndrome. I myself couldn't say that word up until I was 30, probably. And you know, it's so difficult to understand. And we really have to think, when we think of health spaces, how are we approaching this mother that's from Northwest, that's speaking Tswana, that has no English, and you write on her child's medical certificate, hermaphrodite. What is that mother going to do? And this is the cases that we are dealing with. And then the mother will tell everybody, my child is a hermaphrodite. And then we have the infanticide. And then we have community being curious. And we see your genitalia. And then we have the whole child's life impacted. So especially we have to think about healthcare. How do we think about language that we are using? So thank you so much, Casey and Professor Brown. We do have some intersex activists in the room from Intersex South Africa. And Butu, you have the mic. And I would actually like to ask Panna a question. Panna, listening to this conversation, right, and thinking about healthcare being a space for intersex people, I want to ask you, as an intersex person, what do you think should be different in the healthcare environment? And what do you feel, what approach healthcare professionals should be taking when dealing with intersex people?
Sure. Thanks, Crystal. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, like we've been. Yeah, my name is Bana. And yeah, thank you for having me. What I would say is that the reality is that I think the conversation has started to say that it's the starting point, and that's where everything goes wrong. And our parents has gone through so much confusion because of how the diagnosis come out, because they actually don't also tell our parents, you know, the real diagnosis. You keep on going to hospitals over and over again. And I remember with my experience, I had to be hidden in order for them to actually give a diagnosis. I went home without an identity, and me having to live in a rural area and all of that. I think what's important is that, you know, the healthcare services needs to look in a way to ensure that they understand also what they are doing in terms of intersex. The learning is that having to also go through this whole particular process, having to meet so many doctors that you don't even know their specialities, it confuses us as well, because everybody comes with a different diagnosis. Standardization of making sure that they know what they are doing. It's important. Like what the doctor has said to say, I think what's important is for them to go back to the drawing board and ensure that they really inform themselves in making sure that they know how to deal with intersex bodies. That's what I can say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Panna. I'm going to go to Henrietta. So Henrietta is actually my biological sister. And because I'm in Afrikaans, we say voorbare. I don't know the English word. Forward, there we go. So because I am the forward one, and I know my sister went for surgery, right? Like we all knew in the house, but we never spoke. We never spoke about being intersex or our surgeries in the house. And I'm 10 years younger than her. I saw her going to hospital. I saw her coming back. I knew she had to go every 3 months for whatever treatment she was getting. I didn't know at the time. And then I went through the same thing like 5 years later. And then me doing research about intersex and intersex variations and conditions, I was the one that came to my sister and says, hey, do you know you are intersex? Like, she didn't know. And I mean, and that's how she came into the spaces. And from that experience, and you not knowing, and actually your baby sister having to tell you that you are actually intersex, what do you wish the healthcare system would have told you all those years back?
If they would have.
Hi, I'm Henrietta.
Hi, I'm Henrietta. Nice to meet you all. I think if they would have explained it to my mother at first stage, at first stage, like there were 15 doctors. My mother was chased out of the examination room because they're now examining me. And like the embarrassment that moment, because you're now laying there as a 17-year-old girl, 15 doctors then come to examine you, different male doctors. And no one is saying a thing to just look, oh, okay, I could call that one. It's like the embarrassment at that moment, you think like, yo, what's happening? Can I cover my face? But there's nothing. And then this professor comes and then he says, okay, you don't have a womb, so you won't have children one day. Mother, we have to remove this ovaries now because she's going to die in 2 years' time. Cancer will be the cause of her death. And now my mother is crying. I don't know what's going on. Okay, doctor, do the surgery, my child can't die. And then you think, when you get to the age of like 25, and then you think like, I should have been married to society. They're asking questions. Why are you not married? Why don't you have a husband? Or why don't you have any children? And then I can't explain to them because I wasn't explained properly because I'm 17. I was in high school already. So if they would have explained it to my mother, I would have understood it. Like in normal English, as you would speak to a child. But not let them. So I couldn't explain to society why I'm not married, why I don't have children. So I was like shy, hiding away. Like in the evening, going out to parties, either don't mingle with friends or friends having kids. I just say, well, all my friends getting married, I won't go to a wedding. I'll stay at home. If you have a child, I'll stay at home. I'll congratulate you, but I won't go watch that child. That's how I was at 25. And I would distance myself from you. But when Crystal told me, oh, yeah, we intersex, and she invited me to the first intersex meeting I went to, then I started to mingle with friends. I started to explain to them who I am and what I am. So you have to accept me now as I am, and not the way you want me to be. I'm intersex and I'm intersex. So thank you, Crystal.
Thank you, Henrietta. And I think we live in a society where people like to use the phrase that knowledge is power, right? But intersex people are not empowered at all because they don't know anything about their body. And unfortunately, this will make them isolate themselves. We find many intersex people that isolate themselves from community because they themselves do not understand what's happening with their body, and therefore they choose not to interact with society at all. And that's where the problem comes in when dealing with mental health. And thank you so much for being honest and be open for sharing. We also have Gurley. Kelly, I also would like to pose the same question to you because I think it's really important that we hear from intersex people and their realities. Because I mean, we hear from the doctors and we hear from the medical field, but it's so important to hear from intersex people. And I would like to pose to you the same question. What do you think doctors should do differently when they are approaching intersex people when it comes to healthcare? Are you okay? No, it's fine. We see you, we feel you, and we are here for you.
Unfortunately, I was at the hospital yesterday. They asked me to go pee for the pregnancy test. When I tried to explain my story, it was like I was telling a tale, and then we live the trauma every day.
Yeah,
It's so painful.
yeah. We are here for you. And exactly what Gurley says, like as intersex people, I know having a common flu, having a common allergy will send you into more trauma of having to visit the doctor because you have to explain to the doctor because the doctor themselves do not understand. I think the first question that when you visit a general practitioner, the question will always be, when was your last period? They ask this to everyone. And as an intersex person, I used to lie to doctors and I used to say, oh, it was 2 weeks ago, because I just didn't want to explain because I know the trauma that comes with it. So when they used to ask, so when was your last period? I would say 2 weeks ago. I can't remember the date because I have a flu. I just want some antibiotics, some penicillin, some cough syrup, and then I want to go, right? I don't want to talk about my period. I don't want to talk about if I could be pregnant because I'm therefore I have a flu. And I think as intersex people, we relive our trauma all the time. So healthcare should think it doesn't end at the hospital. It doesn't end with the traditional healer. It doesn't end after your surgery. It's a lifelong journey. And like Dr. Ian Ross said, that we need to be compassionate when it comes to healthcare. Okay. Casey, you can go ahead.
Thanks, Crystal. So a few things. I'm going to try to take it down to two. The first one is I don't know where safe doctors are around the country, but I have got a network of doctors in Gauteng, I want to say 3 or 4, and I've got a network of doctors in Cape Town who are safe for intersex people because I've been part of their training. But, and this is post-qualification training, these are private practice doctors. So I don't know where in the government sector you can go safely as an intersex person with the flu. I've got my network of doctors very slowly growing that I can send people to get treated like people. But where do you go if you don't have the access to private doctors, or you're not in Joburg and you're not Pretoria and you're not Cape Town? Where do you go? Because I don't have safe people yet in my network. So send me names of good doctors you've got so far who are accessible. The second one is this whole thing about puberty, and this is linked to Anthony's stuff, is life orientation does such a disservice because it continues, just like everything else in society, perpetuate the binary. So we talk about male and female, men and women. We forget and actively invisibilize intersex people in this process. So everyone who goes through a general education this information is kept from us. So much of intersex variations are discovered at puberty. Let's talk about that. Make it part of the curriculum, like a normal thing that happens, you know? Some people, if testosterone is dominant in their body, this is what happens. If estrogen is dominant in their body, this is what happens. And stop linking it to these desperate binaries.
Thank you so much for that addition, Casey. We have a question from Rochelle.
Okay, so I think my question is in line with Casey's, because I'm thinking about, besides the fact that we are working on legislation in relation to Act 49 and, revisiting what that means. I'm also just thinking, Professor Anthony Brown, hi, how are you? I've only seen you online recently. But I was just thinking on a higher education level, if we're speaking about 2 hours or that minute amount of engagement of medical professionals, how do we stretch that? Who do we need to speak to? Because surely not only endocrinologists like Dr. Ross should be privy to this information if there's such a diversity of bodies in general. And I mean, like, how are we going to push the fact that this diversity also speaks to the complications or the repercussions as much as any other variant that happens in the body? You know, my understanding in relation to that, and maybe Dr. Ross, you can answer in relation to your own experience of how your furthering of this engagement has happened. But then also, Professor Brown, I'd like to know, what can we do in terms of education, and particularly higher education, to ensure that there's proper engagement with this subject and that it doesn't go overlooked as well?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I just want to acknowledge that, Dr. Ross, we do see your hand. We'll go to Professor Brown and then we'll move on to you. Thank you.
So thank you for those questions. I think they are so pivotal. It is important to break open the boundaries of intersex knowledge. Intersex knowledge, the other problem that we are facing here, it is confined within the medical fraternity. It has not been stretched and infiltrated in the broader society where people with intersex variant developments have to live. So they have to live within a school context, they have to live within a career context. And so within these various fields, this knowledge is kept out because it is contained as a medical condition. And so the moment we undo that notion of the pathologizing of intersex knowledge and mainstream it in every ecology of society, then higher education that prepares us for every aspect of society will have to learn about this. But at the moment, it's contained as a medical health condition. That needs to change so that it can be mainstreamed into society.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you so much,
it's on, but it's not, yes.
There we go.
So there is Janet Bulemela on Zoom, who has commented that this is an educative session and they would like us to work in a multidisciplinary framework to ensure that everybody has relief.
Thank you very much. Everybody has made such excellent comments, and I want to commend everybody. And let me, first of all, acknowledge the great difficulty that intersex individuals experience every day. I will say that as endocrinologists, we are aware of this condition and we try to do our best because it is not what we do every day, but certainly it is a component of our work. And so there's a heightened awareness for this. But I think what you are referring to is a global problem amongst healthcare practitioners. And I think the first comment is not to defend my colleagues, but I do want to acknowledge that they have a lot of competing demands, as you can imagine. And my suggestion is to be constructive. And the way in which I think one should be constructive is to approach medical schools so that awareness can be created in the fairly advanced years of the medical school career. And I think you will be surprised by the response that you will get. And I'm expecting it will be positive. And that's largely because of previous experience that we've encountered with unusual and rare disorders. So my suggestion, my constructive suggestion is really to say, approach the medical schools, approach somebody who will create awareness within the faculties and allow the medical school to invite you to create awareness. And I think that would be the starting point. It doesn't address what our learned colleagues have addressed, and that is how the community at large should be addressing it. But at least it's a start. And I think it should go as far as other courses and not exclusively medicine, because we're not the only ones encountering people who are intersex. There are a range of people, but at least it will be a point of departure, and that's what I'm hoping it will achieve. And I hope that will be received in the spirit that it is meant for.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ian Ross. Definitely really appreciate that feedback. And, you know, we have to start somewhere. And as intersex communities and as intersex organizers, we are in constant communication with universities and with schools and really wanting the syllabus to really include more information on intersex people so that doctors are aware. But I do understand that we do have a long journey ahead of us. And I think we need to start with binaries. We need to start having a society, especially a medical society, that thinks beyond the binary and that they understand that people do exist with this natural intersex variations. Dr. Edna, you had your hand up.
Yes, Crystal, thank you. I commend everyone here, and sorry for what people have gone through, but I think we're evolving slowly, and as we've come to working, I know that we're few in the medical fraternity who knows well the intersex, but then if we take the education, like the professor said, it's the education to everyone. Start with us, then go out to the community as we work in multidisciplinary instead of looking at, they said, everyone examining at a different time. And then take a person as a person and be compassionate with them, talk to them, and take them as a whole. So as you're talking to someone who is intersex, you're looking for, they have flu, but then you do not need to examine other things probably at that time. And so they would feel they are also people there, and intersex is not a problem. They can live, they can enjoy life. But then as the activists, as you started already, then you can go to the community. Like the first time when HIV came in, there was too much noise from different directions. If we can be able to manage that as we go to the faculties of medicine, and they put it in the curriculum, use the media, go to the community, and because even here in Swahili, if you ask the name, the other day we were looking for a name. What name can we call it? What should we call it? A condition? Is it a disorder? Is it a disability? So there's still challenges, but when we work together and involve the community and everyone at different levels, then I think we'll manage and come up with this person who is a normal human being like everyone else and living normally like everyone else. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. My name is Virginia Magwaza Wenjinji. Thank you for this session. It's quite helpful. Actually, Professor, we do have a word in Zulu. It's called uncukumbili, which can also be very misinforming, because that's when it gives people that people have two separate sex organs. So we have a challenge as activists to come up with words that will make a language that we would want ourselves to be familiar with and use it. And to the doctor who spoke about us going to the medical fraternity, I think it is dangerous to think that as activists we only make noise and not knock at the doors that we're supposed to knock on. I mean, we've been to medical institutions. I remember a few years ago when I was still young, we had a session at VETS with medical students who stated that issues around intersex within the curriculum are not given any importance or significance. Maybe I think we need to begin there to challenge them. They don't have to wait until they are in the ward or at the theater to learn about intersex. And also, as a person who is working with parents, I find a lot of questions around when you tell parents that let your children to self-determine themselves. I want to come to this point and the new term that I got to, the desperate binary, that this desperate binary is very strong in our minds because parents will ask, so if I allow my child to come out of the hospital without an identity, how do I bring them up? I think we need to have information and ways of encouraging our parents to say, bring up your child as a human being, not as a boy or a girl, but as a human being, because the reason why there's this binary is because there are gender roles that have to be attached to them. So my recommendation from this session is that I would love to see a national campaign that does not only talk about self-determination, but also talking about the medical fraternity in taking this issue serious. Because for us to be able to move, we need to begin to where it starts, right? In the labor wards. And so doctors need to understand these issues, not just as a side thing in their degree, but as something that, because also even that also is very annoying, because now it is intersex people that must go to the doctors and say, please, we are here. Are they not doing research themselves, to learn about the things that they've not learned about before? And unfortunately, that's our lives, right? We've even with trans people, they've always been the trans people who went to say, we are here, please, So, but I would love to see that campaign, and that campaign will also have to involve parents so that we can raise more awareness, because today we are here, some of us, we are preaching to the already converted, but how do we reach out? I think the campaign will be the best thing to do, where we target whoever that needs to be targeted. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Tato Chidari-Gire. I'm with the National Department of Health. I'm currently Acting Chief Director for HIV, AIDS, and STIs. Thank you, Crystal, for inviting us. Thank you, Prof, and thank you, everyone. So I'm speaking from a policymaker point of view as I represent the department. And I really would like to pose a question. I think I can safely say that, when we talk about, let's say, LGBTIQ space, the intersex is the really one space where we are not really very clued up. So from that point, how would you advise the department, the policymakers, people like myself, who are sitting there writing policies and guidelines? And even now, as we are kind of like dealing with the HIV response, and I will keep referring to that because that's where my strength lies. How do we deal with that when it comes to intersex people? I mean, I've been in several platforms that are discussing this, but I'm still very cloudy. I still don't understand. And maybe that's why I came. I mean, I drove from Pretoria. So it's, I think I came to learn and maybe to take something with me as we are developing our national strategic plan, our response, and maybe it's opportune time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Virginia and Dr. Tatu. And Dr. Tatu, thank you so much for being here. As someone for this, to tell you honestly, for this entire year, as the person that works on intersex rights, I've been trying to engage with the Department of Health. We had the Deputy Minister, I think Dr. Kloma, at the SAEU conference in 2019, where we made clear recommendations to health. During this year as well, we have Ria in the room from Fulbright attorneys. We, as an organization, we have developed a material for an amendment on the Health Act. And we have submitted this to the Department of Health from March this year. And I've been trying to engage with them and have a dinner or a sit down with the Deputy Minister and say that we don't have any policies or laws that protect and promote the rights of intersex people. And we want health, look at the Health Act to see what they can stipulate there about autonomy, about sexual characteristics, and about consent. And it's been really difficult. And yesterday, when you responded to me, you can ask my director, I ran upstairs to tell her, someone from health responded to me. I've been waiting for 7 months for someone from health to respond to me. And it's so vital and crucial that you are in this room, and we will definitely take this conversation offline. Since you are the policy writer, you will write. And just thank you so much for being here and acknowledging us. And you know, it affirms intersex people when the Department of Health says that intersex people exist and they are here, because for the longest time, the Department of Health that says these surgeries are not happening. But every month we have a mother, we have an intersex person, we have an intersex adult that is calling us and say, I don't know what to do. This has happened to my child. My child has started a period, but he was assigned a boy. He doesn't want to go to school anymore. We don't know what to do. And we are like, help, speak to us, because you are making these decisions for these children, and that's affecting the entire life. And I'm glad that you are in this room, and I am looking forward for us to continue this conversation. Professor Brown?
I just quickly want to add to this talk. I think you ask, how do we deal with this LGBTI and make sure that the I becomes visible and unsilenced? I think it is a broader conversation, because this whole acronym LGBTI is often treated as a unified group of people. And it's high time that we deal with the letter in each of the letters in this acronym. It is not just in health, but in many other spaces where there's a misinterpretation and a conflation that everybody in this, and you know, it's so horrible what we are called on the outside. We are now called the alphabet gang.
Wow.
So what the alphabet gang is called, there's an assumption that they are the same, they have the same needs, they have the same problems. But each of these letters in this acronym needs a comprehensive understanding, and we need to separate these letters and get a comprehensive understanding thereof. And I think once we have that, we will respond to the diverse needs that consist within queer communities.
Yes, thank you. So I echo that. Thank you so much.
Mind, please. From Patricia Ajok, hello team. I would like to thank all the panelists for this is really great for me as an activist on intersex issues. I'd like to ask what the doctors think. Can I swallow estrogen oral or inject contraceptive to prevent hot flashes? So doctors, please note that question. We're going to take a couple of more comments and questions. From Genevieve Lowe, I would like to know if there has been any movement in the medical sector to rephrase the language around intersex, to move away from referring to intersex as a condition as opposed to a sex variation. Terming intersex as a condition also perpetuates the pathologization English. And then interested to know if that is changing in the medical field. Please note the questions. Njabu Mabu, this is the most educative information on intersex I have ever had, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. Thank you, Njabu from Eswatini. Shaima, I don't have a question at the moment, but I really appreciate this panel discussion. Happy I've been able to attend this. From Frank Musamba, as Tanzania Voice of Humanity, we suggest awareness to Awareness has to be conducted from lower level hospital, from district level, and in education from high education level, secondary education, in police officers, desk officer, even in prison officers also have to be reached out to. That is all from our online folks. Crystal?
Thank you so much. Dr. Ian Ross, I was hoping if I could pose the question of Patricia to you, the question about the hot flashes and asking what is the best way to intake estrogen into the body?
Thank you. It's a great question, and it refers to the fact that an individual might be deficient of estrogen, and that's the explanation for the hot flushes. I don't think the person posing the question is going to be happy with me, but I'm going to be answering the question as honestly as I can. You can inject progesterone, you can take estrogen. Intravenous estrogen is not widely available, certainly not in the Western Cape. So there are ways in which one can address hot flushes, but this should be directed by your medical practitioner, because just taking treatment without supervision can have serious consequences. And unfortunately, being around for several decades, and witnessing the consequences of self-medication, I would consider it to be ill-advised. But what I can say, the good news is you can treat it, and you can treat it very adequately with one or another hormone therapy to determine, and it's critical to determine what your specific needs are. And that's the reason for consulting with the medical practitioner. So please, my appeal would be, please don't self-medicate. Rather treat it. These are powerful agents with powerful consequences and a range of side effects. So if it can be done under supervision, I would be personally grateful for it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ross. And Patricia, thank you so much for that question. Me and you are in the exact same boat. You know, I know the hot flashes, and like it's very difficult to deal with. But as Dr. Ross has explained, it is because of the low levels of estrogen, because essentially a lot of intersex people that have their gonads or testes removed at the age of 15 or 16, their body actually goes into a state of menopausal. So you have teenagers that are going through menopause, in reference me, and I mean that's the life that we live, because our bodies does not naturally then produce those. There was a question regarding language, referring to intersex as condition, and if the medical fraternity or the medical field could look at words of sex variation. And I would like to ask Dr. Edna, with your work that you are doing with intersex people in Tanzania, is this a question that has come up, and is this something that the medical field would engage on, by stop calling it a condition, but variation in sex development or variation in sex characteristics, but leaving the difference and the disorder out and the condition out of it?
I think where we're going as to treating a person as a person, a human being as a human being, we ought to have we ought to have a word to call the intersex, discriminating it, and then thinking in our mind that we have female and option. But I think as we are evolving with time, it will be there as we're working on it slowly.
Okay. I think there was some technical difficulties, Dr. Edna, but I believe that the point that you were trying to make came out strongly, and it's essential, treat a human as a human. And like you were saying that we have started the work. It's taken very long. It's taken extremely long, but eventually intersex people are on this journey of depathologizing our bodies, and that the medical fraternity recognize that this is a natural variant in sex characteristics, and it's very important to treat a human as a human. Thank you so much.
There are two comments right now for any question from Amanda. From University of Washington in Seattle, USA. And they say, thank you for this brilliant panel. I appreciate doctors' insights and especially the hard work of activists in the room. Happy Intersex Awareness Day, and the struggle for justice continues. A following question from Frank is how far are doctors, particularly in South Africa, investing in finding data about number of intersex persons, and even in surveys, including number of intersex people attending clinics?
There are approximately 200 people who are intersex that we know of in the attending the tertiary centres of the Western Cape. But obviously this represents a case-finding study rather than a true prevalence study, and I don't think you can make any assumption other than to presume it's a lot higher.
Thank you so much for answering that question, Dr. Ross. And like you said, that's the people that you are dealing with in the case study, but it's not a true reflection of the number of intersex people. I think what we said when the session started, that experts believe about 2% of the population is intersex, but this could also be incorrect. In the USA, which is actually very interesting, is that now intersex activists and medical people have started doing a study on PCOS. And PCOS is actually a thing that a lot of women are going through, and this relates to a hormone imbalance where they have irregular periods, they have problems with infertility, they also have problems with the levels of their hormones, and people are asking, could PCOS actually be an intersex trait? And if it is, then we have probably have 1 in 4 people would then be intersex if you would link it to that. So it's also interesting how new studies are coming up when it comes to health, that intersex is not just black and white or what people perceive it to be, but there are different variations in sex characteristics. So yeah, I think we've come to the close of our session today. And first of all, I really want to thank Casey Blake, Professor Ian Ross, Dr. Edna, and Professor Anthony Brown, and everybody in the room, and just to tell you that we were supposed to conduct this Doctors Roundtable in March of 2022. And all the no's that we got from health professionals that did not want to have this conversation, they did not want to talk about intersex healthcare. Yeah, let's have a sit here. And the amount of no's I got this year, I had to be persistent to have this conversation, because when we speak to intersex activists, we speak to parents of intersex child, but we don't get the information from the health expertise that works with intersex people. And I really want to thank the health professionals that joined this session today. Casey knows what the struggle this was, because I've been contacting Casey since March to have this conversation. And I hope that other healthcare professionals will have a look at this conversation and see that intersex people, all they want is bodily autonomy and self-determination. All intersex people want is to make decisions on their body. There's no backlash for doctors. We are not pushing back on doctors, because we need health professionals. We need the expertise, but also it's our bodies. And when it's my body, it has to be my choice. And if we leave with one thing, with health professionals, with people in the room, activists, intersex people, that when it comes to your body, it always needs to be your choice. I want to thank everybody for engaging in this conversation, those that are on Zoom and those that are in person. I would like to remind you to follow Iranti on our social medias at Iranti.org. We are on Twitter, we are on Facebook, we are on Instagram, and also on LinkedIn. Iranti is actively working to ensure that we end the violence and discrimination that intersex people faces within society. And as the intersex rights officer, Me? I ensure that we really commit to the intersex community to ensure that eventually South Africa will be a country that is safe for intersex people, that we can have policies in laws within health, within criminal justice, within every part of society where intersex people are and where intersex people exist, that affirms them and that protects them and that assure their safety. I would like to thank everyone once again for being here, and always remember that intersex rights are human rights. Intersex people exist, and the I in LGBTQI, it does not stand for invisible, but it stands for intersex. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to the Iranti team. Thank you, everyone. And yeah, I hope everybody has a great day further. And also, if you want to also share in the conversation and share information about the session, don't forget to use our hashtag intersex awareness, intersex rights, and intersex healthcare. Thank you so much, everyone. Good night.